We have Death Stranding losing its exclusivity with PlayStation for the future. We have the Chief Executive Officer of Sony making strong statements about the upcoming PlayStation games. And we have some very strong contradictions that we are going to talk about in today's video. More like God of War, more like Spider-Man, more like The Last of Us, more like Horizon, and much less like Concord. It seems that this is going to be the future of PlayStation Studios. If you have a PlayStation 5 or a PlayStation 5 Pro, or you're going to buy a PlayStation, or you're simply a fan of Sony games, well, probably, you need to watch this video. Because we talked about what PlayStation is going to be like in the future. Once again, because it has been talked about several times in the past. They were talked about in recent months. But now, the one who has the word speaks. The one who calls the shots. The big boss Hiroki Totoki spoke about the future of PlayStation games and said things that interest us a lot, and that will surely excite you. And he also said things that contradict what PlayStation just did last week. Well, anyway, not to lose the habit, right? Well, before we go on to comment on what Totoki said, we have to comment on this. The little issue of Death Stranding. What happened last week and why Sony is going to let this IP slip away. Because I can already tell you that this contradicts in some way with what Totoki is saying today. Death Stranding sold 19 million copies. In its 5 years of publication, you could say it's a successful game, right? 19 million copies, that's pretty good. In 5 years. It's true that not all copies are from PlayStation, they are also copies from PC. Because this game was published a while ago on PC and sold very well there. Well, nevertheless, beyond the fact that they are good sales, that the game is popular, beyond whether some people like it and some don't, and beyond the fact that a second part is about to be launched, which will probably make this first part even more popular, Sony decided to sell the rights of Death Stranding to Kojima. That is, this is not understood, because you will see that what Totoki says next goes... This contradicts it. For those half lost and half asleep who haven't discovered it yet, I will inform them. Death Stranding is a game from Kojima Productions, developed and created by Hideo, but on consoles, it is a Sony PlayStation exclusive because Sony financed the development of this game with PlayStation money and advertising. But after having invested in the game's development, having invested in the game's graphics engine, in the campaigns, in the distribution of the title and everything else, but Sony decided last week that they no longer wanted the IP and returned it to Kojima. In fact, they sold it to Kojima. The graphics engine should be noted. That was used to develop Death Stranding. Is the Guerrilla Games graphics engine the one from Horizon called Decima. So Sony even put the graphics engine. For those who are not aware, let me tell you that the graphics engine is the tool you use to make a video game. It's not something free. It's not something that one says, well, no, they used Excel. Well, Excel is not free either. You should pay for it. It's a dedicated software that one has to pay for. You have to pay for a license. You have to put down some money. A few years ago, it was a lot of money that you had to put down to use Unreal Engine or Unity or graphic engines like the most famous ones today. Nowadays, many graphic engines like Unreal Engine give you the graphic engine for free for you to use. And then you have to pay a certain quota of the game's sales. And other things, well, in the end, nothing is free, and the graphic engines are not free because they are tools that took a long time to develop and that are used to make video games. It's like saying Photoshop, right? Yes, you get it. It's not free. Downloading it illegally doesn't make it free. Well, Sony provided the graphics engine for Death Stranding to its money. Do you understand? It's strange that they suddenly say, well, you know what? We put a lot of money, a lot of effort, a lot of work, but you know what? It doesn't matter. Take it. Keep it, Kojima. You keep it. Why is this contradictory? Well, by this guy, Hiroki Totoki, President, Chief Operating Officer, and Chief Financial Officer of Sony, who claims that PlayStation is currently very focused on its video game business and that things are now going to be focused on single-player games. The thing is like this. Just a few days ago, Sony published a financial report from Sony, from the whole company, a financial report that includes cinema, television, music, players, speakers, televisions, and of course video games and PlayStation. After the financial report, Totoki and company gave a kind of conference in which they answered questions from investors, from those who put the money And among the statements that Totoki and his team gave, they said that Sony was more focused than ever on developing video games for a single player experiences, and that they are going to focus on the development and publication of that type of games. Helldivers 2 came out great. Perfect Concord came out horrible. What is the learning that Sony PlayStation had about these two experiences? It seems like none. Helldivers 2 was a great success, while Concord ended up being closed. We gained a lot of experience and learned a lot from both, although we are currently still in the learning process. Well, that's a convoluted and complex way to say, well, we have no idea what happened, end of conversation. They literally declared this at this investor conference because they were asked what's going on with games as a service. I mean, 2 years ago, there was Jim Ryan, everything was going to be games as a service. They sold us like that was the revolution of Sony PlayStation. And now what? Concord lasted only 11 days despite a $200 million investment from Firewall. The game cost $400 million in total. What happened? Where is it? What happened? I fell asleep during a nap, and when I woke up, it was no longer relevant. The head of Sony stated that they haven't learned enough about games as a service and why they succeed or fail. For now, they will stop pretending to understand games as a service and instead focus on what Sony PlayStation excels at: single-player games. The games that we have always liked. The strange thing is that this man comes to tell us this just after releasing the rights to Death Stranding, which I don't quite get and I will never get, because Death Stranding is precisely that, a single-player game with a story, which is fine. It will have its online multiplayer facet, this thing about supporting others, building and so on, but it is a single player, said and done, and made and done. We intend to develop an optimal portfolio of titles during the current period of the mid-range plan. That is, in the short term, of single-player games, which are our strengths and have a greater predictability of becoming successes due to our proven intellectual property, said the Sony board of directors. That is, we are going to focus on what we know works well, what we know has worked for us, which are the single-player games, the stories for a single player, which is what our people want to play. We will complement this with live service games that seek to take advantages while assuming a certain amount of risk at the time of launch. They weren't very specific here, but basically, or at least I understand that they said that they are going to launch some game as a service, but taking into account a limited investment and a small risk margin. That is, they are not going to risk buying a studio because it's a multiplayer game that someone within PlayStation believes is going to work. It's more or less what they did with Helldivers 2. Invest moderately in a title that already had a history of being launched on PC. A certain amount of people knew the first installment. It wasn't a costly title. It wasn't a totally crazy and outrageous bet like Concord. And it ended up working out well. It's curious because Helldivers 1 is officially the first PlayStation video game to be published on Steam, on PC, and Helldivers 2 is the first PlayStation video game to be published on Steam and PlayStation 1 simultaneously. This fact clearly doesn't serve you for anything, nor does it contribute much to the video, but now you know it. Helldivers always was the beginning of a new cycle for PlayStation. Goodbye to that of investing hundreds of millions in a multiplayer studio. Or goodbye to the idea of buying studios just because they have developed a multiplayer. As with Bungie, Firewalk, or several others that mobile bought, those things, it seems that they would be telling us this, and it seems that from PlayStation, well, they really decided that they are going to focus on what is worth it, on what made PlayStation great these last years. And I think that is what I like the most. And I think it is also what you like the most about PlayStation, the stories they tell, the single-player games, the adventures we have lived, being Kratos, being Ellie, being Nathan, Peter Parker, and all those. And where does Sam Porter Preaches fit in? Where does Death Stranding 2 fit into all of this? Because if the rights to Death Stranding return to Kojima Death Stranding 2, I understand that it is totally in Kojima's hands and that it could become multi-platform from day one. We have to see what they signed and in what way, but for now it is not known. It remains contradictory because we should know if Death Stranding 2 stays within PlayStation. Since that is what Totoki is saying they actively want to do from here to the future. But they also talked about cutting costs, about cutting back on infrastructure. of downsizing all the machinery involved in Sony and PlayStation's video game production, and to focus their efforts once again on single-player experiences. It is likely that in this plan or in this restructuring, we know that the restructuring of Sony PlayStation has been happening since they moved Jim Ryan. And they put two CEOs in PlayStation, Herman Hulse and Nijino. We know it's been happening since then. Maybe they're still in that process and they're cutting back. They've closed studios, cancelled projects, they're selling IPs, somewhat outsourced like Death Stranding, and maybe they're still on this plan. I don't know, maybe Kojima put a lot of money in, or maybe it's part of the agreement for the next game that Kojima is going to develop exclusively for PlayStation. We still lack a lot of information, but for now, what we know, I think I like it, and I think you guys like it too. Sony is focusing on single-player games, and in the very background, maybe some multiplayer slips in. But they have to be very sure that it's going to work and that they're not going to take big risks. Good, well, that's where Sony is heading, that's where it's going. Look what I have. Do you like it? It's a PlayStation mousepad I bought on Amazon. I'll do an unboxing when I gather other small items to unbox. Well, Call of Duty headphones, I have everything. Soon this week I'll release some unboxing, or some compiled video of unboxings maybe. Of course, subscribe to this channel so you don't miss anything, so you don't lose the news, so you don't miss the zero moment of everything that's happening with PlayStation. And all this change that we're experiencing in the video game industry. If you like this content, you'll probably like this video that's coming out here, or this other one, which is also great. And why not subscribe to our Xbox channel if you're more of an Xbox player than a PlayStation 1. In the first comment, daily podcast of big data news, where we come out from Monday to Friday in audio format. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.